Can you tell us what you know about DES?
DES? No.
I don't know anything about it.
It doesn't ring a bell.
I have never heard of it.
It sounds familiar, but I'm not quite sure. Is that something to do with biology?
Something about babies, I believe, and birth defects, and as far as that, I can't go any further.
Something I'm glad didn't happen to me.
DES is a synthetic estrogen which was used between 1941 and 1971 to prevent miscarriage. More than 6 million mothers, daughters, and sons were exposed to this drug that is now linked to a host of medical problems, including cancer. Discovered in 1938, it was a significant breakthrough in the world of medicine. But from the very beginning, its safety was questioned.
More than 40 years ago, DES was proven to cause cancer in animals. Instead of paying attention to that and not exposing humans based on the good animal evidence, doctors and drug companies forged ahead and started using it to, quote, prevent miscarriage, unquote, and for a number of other purposes.
DES was prescribed under many names. Initially, the FDA would not allow DES to be marketed because its safety could not be proven. But in 1941, the FDA reversed its decision. DES was proclaimed a miracle drug and given the FDA's stamp of approval.
During the peak of the use of DES for miscarriage prevention, there were more than 400 manufacturers making DES available. Today, there are some 24 manufacturers.
The 30s and 40s were known as the era of wonder drug pharmacology. Women trusted their doctors and took DES without hesitation.
My name is Mary Nagel, and I'm a DES mother. I found this out 28 years after I took the drug. Let me start at the beginning. I was married a few weeks after Pearl Harbor because my husband enlisted and we decided we wanted to get married before he left. I went to work in the war plant, waited anxiously for him to return, and when he did, we immediately decided to raise a family. Well, unfortunately, I had a miscarriage, a very painful miscarriage, which almost took my life. The doctors subsequently told me that I would never be able to bear children. Well, lo and behold, I became pregnant again. Because of my past history, the doctor prescribed a drug which he told me would help me save my pregnancy. I just felt in awe of him. I respected him. If he would have said, Mary, take arsenic, I would have done it, anything to have a baby. After my children were born, I continued to visit this doctor for my gynecological examination. At one point, he told me that I had been given DES when I was pregnant with my 2 girls. I knew what DES was because I had a niece who had cancer from DES. I put my head down on his desk and I started to cry. And he apologized and told me that every doctor was using it at that time and they thought it was a safe drug and he was a victim as much as I was, but no excuse satisfied me. I was angry, I was hurt, I felt like striking out at him. And all I could think of was, how can I tell my girl? I thought maybe they're sitting on a time bomb, or maybe they already have cancer in their bodies.
I was amazed at their reaction. They didn't blame me for taking the drug, and luckily they didn't have cancer. But I don't know what's going to happen to them in the future.
Because of my DES experience, I've learned to question doctors. I don't accept the way I did years ago on blind faith, everything a doctor tells me. I won't even take an aspirin unless I absolutely have to.
One of the saddest lessons to be learned from the DES tragedy is the arrogance that many doctors have for scientific information. During much of the 1950s, all of the 1960s, and even the early part of the 1970s, thousands of doctors were prescribing DES, even though it had been shown to cause cancer in animals, and even though a number of scientific studies had shown that it didn't work for the purpose for which doctors were prescribing it.
By 1952, a study by Dr. William Diekman at the University of Chicago stated conclusively that DES did not prevent miscarriage, yet doctors continued to prescribe it to pregnant women.
When the Diekman study was published, of course, it created a lot of attention. Our people looked at it at Lilly, physicians, obstetricians around the country looked at it, and there was not a wholesale acceptance of the conclusions. For one thing, he didn't use the drug in patients for whom it turns out it is most needed. So there was only partial acceptance. DES continued to be used up until the time when progesterone products became available, and they replaced DES.
Progesterone didn't replace DES. DES was taken off the market for use in pregnant women when it was linked to a rare cancer in DES daughters.
We had no suspicion of the connection with DES until the mother of my second patient asked me, subsequent to the patient's treatment, maybe a year and a half later, she asked me if the stilbestrol that she'd taken when she was pregnant with this girl could have played any part in the development of her tumor. That was the first inkling I had that there might be a clue in the prenatal history of these individuals. We had very carefully gone into the other questions that always come up. Do they smoke? What infectious diseases have they had? Did they use Tampax? You can think of 100 possible connections, none of which seem to apply here. Well, with this clue, I asked several more mothers, and all of them had been exposed to stilbestrol.
When did you take DES and why?
I took DES during my pregnancy with both Mindy and my older daughter, as a matter of fact, because of staining during pregnancy. And I took it almost entirely through my entire pregnancy with Mindy.
Did you know what you were taking?
Absolutely. I certainly did at that time. Of course, it was a miracle drug to keep me pregnant. I took it, had complete faith in my doctor.
No one ever talked about any possible problems?
Not at that time.
When was this?
What year? 1952, 1953, 1954.
So you're satisfied that the drug actually helped you maintain your pregnancy?
Well, I don't know if it helped me maintain my pregnancy. I stayed pregnant.
My mother had made me aware prior to it that she did take this drug, diethylstilbestrol, and that there were reports of, possibility of cancer. And of course, I was very frightened because I said, oh my God, what if I have it? Of course, I think that's probably why now it's all right, because for 5 years I had been working it through. So when I finally did have cancer, it was, well, so it happened. The bombshell hit, and thank God now I'll be able to probably live the rest of my life.
I began to see the gynecologist when I was 17, and at that time there was nothing noticed as far as changes as a result of DES. When I was 24, the doctor picked up a lesion, which turned out to be adenocarcinoma. Looking back on it now, I say, I can't believe I went through that whole thing. It was just such an incredible thing to go through. I'm a registered nurse. Now that I'm working in the hospital where I had the surgery, repressing the thought of having cancer is probably the easiest way for me to deal with it. Cancer is something that always seems to happen to somebody else. And when it happens to you, there's panic. What if it spread? I wanted it out immediately. Dennis was so incredible. Every time I would feel depressed or unhappy, he would just listen to me. I was scared that I would never be able to have sex because I had had a hysterectomy and part of my vagina had also been removed. It was pretty terrible at first. there was no sensation at all. And I was afraid, that it would never return. I was afraid this is what it's going to be like. And when I would go to the doctor and he would ask me how's sex, I would say fine, because I was afraid that if I told him it wasn't, he'd want to operate again or do something else, and I didn't want to have any more done. So I just figured I'll accept this. Fortunately, it changed, and physically, I feel much more able to do things I couldn't do right after the operation.
Don't breathe from the shoulder.
I wanted to blame somebody. I think that was like the strongest issue for me, is who can be held responsible for what's happened to me? Certainly I don't hold my mother or her doctor responsible. I held responsible those who made this drug.
I don't want to diminish the suffering and anguish that these young ladies have had. It's a heartbreaking situation to see them. But I think that the way to resolve this problem is not through litigation in the courts. I feel that we're in a litigious society at the moment. People are suing for almost any reason. Recently, a little girl failed to get a prize in a Cracker Jack box and sued as a result. I think that means should be developed to deal with this problem other than through the courts, and I'm hopeful that somehow or other a means will be found.
Many DES families disagree. For them, taking the pharmaceutical companies to court is one way to make amends for problems they must endure. Some winning suits have set precedents. Some have been settled out of court.
Like most American people, when you believe in your doctor and you have faith in him and confidence in him, you do what he tells you to do. And our doctor was very competent. He was very young. And being young, he was right on top of everything new. And he latched on to the drug because he, in his heart, believed that it was going to help.
We were married 33 years ago, right here in Buffalo. We wanted a family right away. With my first pregnancy and our daughter, Deborah, I had problems right from the beginning. I was spotting. And our doctor prescribed DES as a miracle drug to help save the pregnancy. I stayed in bed for quite a while, and I did complete the pregnancy.
With Marilyn's second and third pregnancy, we weren't that lucky. She had a miscarriage, and she had a stillborn. And finally, we had our son. And at that point in time, we decided that that would be fine.
As a result of her exposure to my exposure to DES, she contracted cancer.
All that ever laid on my mind is, is she going to die? And why her? Why did she have to get it?
Our daughter was 15 years old at the time, and after she found out that she did have the hysterectomy and she wouldn't have children, her whole personality changed. She just wasn't the sweet, quiet, introverted little girl she was before this. She passed away when she was 17, 3 months before her 18th birthday. I knew the end was coming, and I stayed with her the last night. And she was up all night and getting pain shots whenever she requested them, which was every hour or two. And towards morning, she says to me, "Mom, I'm going to die, and I don't want to die. Please help me." And I said to her, "Debbie, you're not going to die." I says, "I'm here." I says, "Today's my birthday. You're not going to die on my birthday." The nurse was in the room at the time. And the nurse says, "Come on, Debbie, let's sing happy birthday to your mother." And then the weak voice, her and the nurse sang happy birthday to me, and that was it.
Although the cancer incidents proved to be extremely rare, studies found that more than half of all DES daughters have other non-cancerous vaginal and cervical abnormalities. But there is another tragic consequence of DES. Today, most DES daughters are of childbearing age, and for them, being pregnant and staying pregnant is a struggle.
There seems to be a doubling of the prematurity rate, and this is of great concern. There also seems to be an increase in tubal pregnancy and possibly even overall miscarriage.
Once DES was linked with cancer, doctors were urged to alert those patients to whom they'd given the drug. Few doctors complied, and the great majority of DES people have no knowledge of their exposure. As a result, organizations were formed to educate the public.
My mother is an avid reader of newspapers and stuff, and happened to notice an article that was talking about DES and the possible side effects to the children. She told me when I was around 19, 20 years old that I was a DES daughter. Mom was given DES, she had never had miscarriages, but just because it was a new drug to be given, and that they thought it would help a pregnancy and, you know, maybe keep any problems from happening farther down the line. I was not angry with Mom because she took it in good faith. The only thing that concerned me a little bit was, would I be able to have children? But I found, which is kind of strange, as the time goes by and the more I learn, the angrier I become. A lot of people, the minute they learn they're DES exposed, automatically register cancer. That's not the primary worry. There's several other changes that can be going on internally which show up during pregnancy. I was affected by DES in that when I was pregnant, I almost had a miscarriage at 6 months. I almost lost her. Luckily, my doctor knew I was DES exposed and had been watching, you know, keeping an eye out on things. And when he discovered that I was dilating, he put me in the hospital and tied my cervix together. And luckily, I carried, you know, Laura full term. After that, I started really wondering about DES and what else was going to happen. Because I didn't know anything about DES until I got involved with DES Action. I wrote and asked if there was anything I could do to help them. And they said, sure. They wrote back and asked me if I would like to start a Louisiana chapter. After a lot of thought, I said yes. The first article that came out in the Sunday paper was entitled DES Activist, which the neighbors were calling up saying, oh, we have an activist in our neighborhood, which was funny, but you can be a good activist as well. So DES Action is a group of concerned people throughout the United States that keep up on the latest DES research. It wasn't hard to organize a group of women because the people here are really interested and concerned. And it's nice to sit down and talk about DES with another DES daughter and to know you're not alone, that other people are really going through the same thing you are. I do have worries about DES and what's going to happen farther down the line. But I know that there's research going on. And I hope it can continue to go on. Because nobody really quite knows if the DES story is going to affect us more, if we're just out of the danger period and that's the last we'll hear about it.
DES has affected sons as well. Studies suggest that they too have fertility problems and genital abnormalities.
Sons are reluctant to come in before exams. I'm convinced that a lot of this has to do with the fact that mothers aren't always telling their sons that they are DES sons. But sons are also reluctant to find out that there's any problem with infertility. I think part of the problem is that nobody wants to know that his genitalia is different than anybody else's.
I found out that I had been exposed to DES because both my sisters were also exposed, and sort of in passing it told me that men also had reactions to it. It's harder for DES sons to talk about their problems. You know, there's this whole thing that men have to be, you know, macho and sexually potent and are very afraid to deal with those type of problems or talk about those kind of problems. I have, and I've had for many years, certain abnormalities in my testicles. One is much smaller than the other. In my past, as an adolescent, I made a bigger deal of it, and that's really where I feel that I was most victimized. I saw myself as infertile, sexually impotent, just a sort of a tragic figure, and I hid that from the whole world. You know, the information is limited. Some of those abnormalities can lead to an increased risk in cancer. Every 6 months, I get certain tests done. I had a fertility test done a number of years ago, and I was normally fertile. DES hasn't affected me in any way whatsoever physically. I play basketball, I go swimming, I work out in the gym, I do the normal run-of-the-mill activities. Presently, I'm a law student. I just finished my second year in law school, and DES hasn't affected me there either. But I know that there's a real shortage of sons to come and talk to each other, to write letters, to just demystify the whole thing, so people are not hysterical and frightened, but are responsible and concerned, get themselves taken care of, and just really figure things out instead of isolating themselves, being really frightened and alone. Well, interestingly, Joanna is also a DES child, a DES daughter. We didn't know it when we met. We met at a party, and we've been together ever since. They all look pretty loud. It hasn't affected our relationship at all, at least not in a physical sense. Again, you know, I may have emotional problems that linger from the things that went on in my past that come in and affect all my relationships. But physically, there's no problem at all.
How did the base gallop sleep?
I do worry that if we decide to have children, you know, who knows what will happen further down the line. The thing about DES is obviously the effects come many years later, or a number of years later after the DES has been taken, and the drug companies deny that, they still deny to this day that DES causes any effects. So, you know, you can talk about the profit motive or whatever, there's something going on.
Profit was indeed the motivation behind the use of DES by the cattle industry. It was given to cattle to promote growth on less feed. And up until 1979, when it was banned for this use, 85% of all our beef was fed DES. Banned for use in pregnancy because of possible carcinogenic effects, DES is nonetheless prescribed today. One very beneficial use is the treatment of certain types of breast and prostate cancers. However, there are several other uses which are considered controversial.
Primarily, DES is approved for treatment in estrogen deficiency states, which may occur when the ovary does not function properly in younger women, and more commonly when the ovary stops producing estrogen in the menopausal state.
Most discomforts of menopause can be treated by natural means. Nevertheless, some doctors continue to prescribe DES or estrogens, even though they all increase the risk of cancer.
As a post-menopausal pill, it's cheap. I can understand them using it for people who have limited funds. However, I will not use it because of my concern about the story of any synthetic drug that I don't know about, and I don't think we know everything there is to know about diethylstilbestrol.
Many people do not know that DES is still prescribed as the morning after pill, often given to victims of rape and incest. It is also used as a postcoital contraceptive.
It's incredible to me that DES is used as a morning after pill at so many student health services and clinics, because it has never been proven to be truly effective. And in the few studies that I consider truly responsible, particularly one done of rape victims at Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta, the women who received the DES had just about as many pregnancies as those who didn't get it.
We feel that the use of DES as a morning after pill for a very short period of time, under very limited conditions and not as a routine type of contraception, is probably acceptable, especially and probably only in emergency situations. It's still overused. One of the most grotesque examples is its continued use to suppress lactation in women who've just delivered a child, even though using mild pain pills such as aspirin or hot soaks are just as effective for treating the painful symptoms of breast engorgement. Many doctors still prescribe DES. It's giving those women an unnecessary risk for something that is just as easily treated by simpler, safer measures.
As long as the physician gives the patient the proper instructions and the patient follows the physician's instructions, there is no inherent significant danger associated with the use of DES.
The lesson of DES is obvious. DES is only one of thousands of drugs on the market. Many drugs help us, even save lives. Others are unnecessary, overused, even harmful. Although the pharmaceutical companies strive to develop better and more useful products, we must keep in mind that they are a multi-billion-dollar industry that profits from drug sales. It is up to all of us to take responsibility for our health, to question doctors and the authority of the FDA, and to make sure that stringent drug laws are upheld in this country. We must be sure the benefit is worth the risk before taking any medication.